a philosophical description of the Bohr's atomic model. In this presentation, I will be talking about my understanding of Niels Bohr atomic model. My name is Mr. Gonzalez. Thank you so much for your time. Niels Bohr atomic model favors what I call relevance. It favors a momentaneous time and resists infinity. Even if there is a tendency to an infinity of energy levels, Bohr's model is seen in the stability of atoms, and also it is expressed in the Bohr radius. So I propose that the very act of observation is dominant in Bohr's thought. What I mean by observation is how the identity of a being responds to the external world. And by identity, I mean how the identity of that entity is increased in the external world. In other words, in observation, the external overcomes the internal. And in identity, the internal overcomes the external. So Niels Bohr represents what I call relevance, in which there is a tendency towards an infinity of atoms' energy levels, but the stability of the atom, corresponding to that relevance, favors a moment that resists infinity, and that is expressed in the Bohr radius. Now, observation overcomes identity. I represent it with O greater than 1. Observation, meaning, that's what it means. Observation is greater than the identity of the entity. So, specifically in Bohr's philosophy, the external dominates the internal. Observation dominates identity. The observation of the stability of the atom overcomes its identity when we see the prediction of emission light, overshadowing the identity of the electron itself. That is because in Bohr's atom, when the electron jumps closer to the nucleus, which is called the ground state of the atom, its identity is diminished, and making an observation of an hydrogen atom with the release of a photon. On the contrary, as the electron jumps further from the nucleus, a photon is absorbed, or a quanta, causing the increase of the identity of the electron in a higher energy level. The Bohr atom favors observation in the form of the emission of photons, and resists identity when it favors the identity of a ground state, not an excited one. Okay, now, what is Bohr's main focus? What is the main focus of Bohr's atomic model? Atoms resist infinite energy levels and embrace the moment, a perfect moment of stability, which it is expressed in the Bohr radius. The focus on Bohr's investigations is the observation of how atoms are stable and exist. The Rutherford atom was not supposed to be stable because a circling electron radiates electromagnetic radiation, and soon it will collapse into the nucleus. Bohr prevented this collapse with the introduction of the Bohr radius. The excited state of the atom is dependent of higher energy levels when the electrons absorb energy packets, known as quanta. Bohr harmonized the quantum theory presented by Max Planck and Albert Einstein with the theory presented by Rutherford about the atom. Now, what is the physics? What is the physics in Bohr's philosophy? By physics, I don't mean the technical language. I do not mean the rational foundation, but more like along the same lines as Bohr, a philosophical take. Let us remember that Soren Kierkegaard influenced the philosophy of Niels Bohr. In what way? Well, Soren Kierkegaard, a Danish philosopher too, the father of existentialism, he proposed that belief and mistrust are related somehow. Your mistrust of God gives substance to faith. In the same way, we see how Bohr's complementary principle brings a paradoxical relationship in which wave and particles, in such a paradox, they complement each other. Matter is the observer that gives rise to relevance. The concrete entity that gives rise to that relevance in Bohr's atom is matter. Sounds redundant and may be convenient, but I propose that matter is the entity that resists infinity and favors the moment. I want to clarify that by resisting infinity and by favoring the moment is what I call relevance. Matter favors this moment of creation that Bohr theorized as the Bohr radius. Matter refuses to allow infinity to take over. Matter is the observer that produces the stability of the elements and the essence of stable atoms. Obviously, I'm ignoring radioactivity for now, not a part of the subdimension I'm discussing, because relevance is a subdimension. So my take is there are different subdimensions, not necessarily space and time. Space and time they are really broad dimensions made of smaller dimensions, if I may call it. We humans as observers and making measurements are limited in our ability to penetrate into the essential, but that which is essential was produced or pinpointed by matter, because matter observed it as an entity. So what matter observes is what we humans are able to see, to observe. So the observation from matter is the reason behind relevance and the stability seen in the Bohr radius. So I want to say we as observers are limited in our ability to penetrate into the essential, but that which is essential was produced because matter observed it first. What is the dimensional platform? What is that dimensional platform? Time and space are dimensions, but not the ones that I'm presenting in my argument. I'm arguing first for relevance, which is seen in the work of Niels Bohr. More presentations will follow, in which other scientists concentrate on different dimensions, subdimensions. So what is that dimensional platform? If we talk in the language of space and time, I would say that time inside the Bohr atom is relevant. If we could live inside an atom, time will be perceived as relevant. What does this mean? A time that resists infinity. Remember, relevance is what resists infinity and what favors the moment. So a time that resists infinity, seen in the higher energy levels, that infinity of energy levels that are possible, and favors the moment, seen in the Bohr radius. So I might propose that time inside a black hole is not much different than time inside an atom. Our linear time is a relevant expansion of a frozen time, just as ordinary particles are a relevant expansion of virtual particles. And the illusion of reality is expanded into quantum, let's say, electrodynamics. So if you consider reality as a relevant expansion of the vacuum, quantum electrodynamics has to be a subdimension worthy to explore. So mathematically speaking, relevance is the most salient feature of a system. Just as the vacuum leads to quantum electrodynamics, or the illusion of reality leads to the quantum, or virtual particles lead to the real ones, or a frozen time leads to our linear time. So the most salient feature of a system is relevance. It could be compared to the first few terms in an expansion of powers. That's relevance, mathematically speaking. There might be an infinite expansion of energy levels, but the relevance of the Bohr radius, that average size of all atoms in the ground state, is resisting it. Matter gives the very first moment of what we call observation a significance that is against infinity. Matter, I repeat it, matter gives the very first moment of what we call observation a significance that is against infinity. Matter is what gives rise to what we call relevance, and Bohr calculated it to be the Bohr radius. What is relevant is due to what I call the first observation made by matter where time is frozen, such as inside an atom, almost as if time is frozen inside an atom, not much different from the time inside a black hole. What is our perception of matter? We perceive matter as that first moment of observation produced by matter's observing action. The very act of observation made by matter, that very act in the beginning of time, if we could call it that way, that matter made an observation by virtue of being there, existing, is what causes relevance. The Bohr radius, the resistance to infinity, a moment where time is frozen. All these are not independent of matter, and us humans are limited by this very act of observation made by the entity we call matter. All these are not independent of matter, and us humans are limited by this very act of observation made by the entity we call matter. So in summary, okay, let me see if I find it. Okay, this one. Okay, this one. Basically talking what I just said. Matter is responsible for the determination of the Bohr radius. Bohr radius is not independent of matter. Okay? And so a summary will be the work of Niels Bohr follows a time that is relevant and resists infinity. That infinity is seen in the energy levels of the atom. It favors the moment Bohr radius, which is the Bohr radius. So time is frozen inside an atom, makes the atom stable. This relevance is the result of matter as an observing entity. The Bohr radius, with its energy levels and the stability of atoms, is a physical manifestation of the dimension I call relevance. Space and time are dimensional entities that can be explained. They could be explained in terms of subdimensions, where relevance is one of them. More to come in future presentations. Thank you very much for your time. My name is Mr. Gonzalez, and I am presenting how the work of Niels Bohr can be understood using the subdimension I call relevance. Thank you so much.